Welcome to my channel. I've always loved San Francisco. There's something about this city that feels like it's constantly alive, bustling with possibilities and hidden stories. I'm Maya, a 30-year-old graphic designer, and my life here has been a blend of work, quiet moments, and unexpected turns. I live alone in a chic motor apartment that I'm proud to call my own. It's not huge, but it's perfect for me. The best part is its location, just a short walk from the design firm where I SP most of my days. My job is my passion. I dive into my work with an intensity that often surprises me. Each project feels like a new adventure, a chance to create something unique and meaningful. On weekends, when I need to escape the buzz of the city, I head to a small park nearby. It's my sanctuary. The park isn't anything extraordinary, just a patch of green amid the concrete, but it's where I find peace. The tall trees and chirping birds offer a kind of quiet that's hard to find elsewhere in the city. It's here that I find solace and inspiration, a place where I can think and recharge. One crisp autumn afternoon, while I was enjoying the usual tranquility of the park, everything changed. I was lost in thought, sketching ideas for a new project, when a sudden commotion jolted me out of my I looked up to see a man sprawled on the grass, looking a bit disoriented. "Are you all right?" I asked, rushing over to him. The man, who looked to be in his mid-30s, blinked up at me. "Yeah, I'm fine, just tripped over my own feet," he said with a sheepish grin. His name was Jake, and as it turned out, he worked in real estate. Jake had a charisma about him that was hard to ignore. His outgoing personality contrasted sharply with my more reserved nature. Over the next few weeks, we kept running into each other in the park. What started as casual conversations soon blossomed into something more. We went from chatting about the weather to sharing stories over coffee. Our weekends began to revolve around each other, and before long our time together extended into late-night dinners and even full weekends spent exploring the city. Our relationship progressed quickly. It felt natural and exciting, but also a bit overwhelming. One day, Jake proposed that we move in together. I was caught off guard. The idea of merging my life with someone else's was daunting, but I could deny how much I cared for him. After some thought, I agreed. We found a larger apartment in a new part of the city, one with bright rooms and an airy feel that symbolized a fresh start for us. Moving in together was supposed to be a new beginning, but soon I noticed cracks in our seemingly perfect life. It started subtly. Jake suggested that I should cut back on my work hours to focus more on our home and our relationship. At first, I thought he was joking, but as he continued to press the issue, I realized he was serious. I was taken aback. My work meant everything to me. It wasn't just a job, it was a big part of who I was. A thought of stepping back from my career felt like losing a piece of myself. I tried to balance both, but the tension was palpable. The situation was further complicated by Jake's mother, Mrs. Harrison, who lived nearby. She visited often, and her presence added another layer of stress to our relationship. Mrs. Harrison, a woman in her early 60s, was kind but had strong traditional views about gender roles. Her comments about homemaking and prioritizing family over work made me feel as though my career was being dismissed as insignificant. Jake seemed to align with his mother's
views more and more, and the strain began to show. Despite the growing pressure, I tried to stay optimistic. I found myself constantly juggling between fulfilling my work responsibilities and trying to meet the expectations set by Jake and his mother. It was like walking a top, and I felt like I was about to fall off one night after a particularly long day at work. I sat in our new apartment feeling overwhelmed. I realized that I was losing sight of myself. My independence, which had always been my strength, was slipping away. It was in this moment of clarity that I decided I needed to do something to preserve my sense of self while navigating this new challenging phase of my life. And so began a silent act of rebellion. I made a decision to pretend that I had quit my job while continuing to work from home. I set up a separate savings account to stash away money for my freelance projects. It was a way to reclaim a part of my life, a small private rebellion against the pressure I was feeling. Little did I know this decision would set the stage for a confrontation that would change everything. I thought moving in with Jake would be a new adventure, a chance to build something meaningful together. But as the weeks turned into months, the excitement of our new apartment began to wear off, revealing underlying issues we hadn't fully addressed. Jake's suggestions about my career continued. He would casually bring up the idea of me reducing my work hours, always framing it as a way to enhance our relationship. It would be nice if you could be around more, he'd say, his voice filled with genuine concern. We could use more time together, maybe even worse, on making our place feel more like home. At first I tried to brush it off. I thought maybe it was just a phase, but the more he brought it up, the more I felt like my independence was being chipped away. Balancing my job with the demands of our relationship was becoming increasingly difficult. I loved Jake, but I loved my work too. It was a core part of who I was. Things took a turn for the worse when Jake's mother, Mrs. Harrison, started visiting more frequently. Her visits were always polite, but they carried an underlying tension. Mrs. Harrison had her own ideas about how a woman should prioritize her life, and it seemed her opinions were influencing Jake more than I realized. One day as I was preparing dinner, Mrs. Harrison stopped by unexpectedly. She looked around the kitchen and made a comment that stung. It's important to make a home feel warm and inviting, keeping things organized and spending time on it can really make a difference, she said, her tone casual but her words heavy with implication. I smiled tightly, trying to keep my composure. I agree, Mrs. Harrison. I've been working on making it a comfortable place for us. Oh, I'm sure you're doing your best, she replied, but there was a note of disapproval in her voice. Sometimes, though, it's better to focus more on creating a nurturing environment at home rather than being too engrossed in work. The conversation left me feeling frustrated and trapped. Jake and I had never discussed this level of interference from his mother, and it seemed like he was aligning with her traditional views more and more. I began to feel like an outsider in my own home. I tried to adapt. I cut back on some work hours and focus more on the house, but it felt like a part of me was shrinking despite my efforts. The strain between us grew. Jake would often bring up how my work was keeping me away from our relationship. You're always busy, Maya. Can't you take a break? He'd say. The final straw came one evening when we had a particularly heated argument. Jake was frustrated and his irritation bubbled over. You don't support me or our future, he yelled. You're always prioritizing your job over us. This isn't what I envisioned for us. I was devastated. I felt like I was being pulled in two different directions, torn between my love for Jake and my passion for my career. It seemed like nothing I did was ever enough. The pressure was relentless and I was running out of ways to keep everything balanced in a desperate bid to retain some control over my life, I decided to take a drastic step. I began to pretend that I had quit my job behind closed doors. I continued to work on freelance projects, setting up a separate savings account to stash away the money I earned. It was a secret rebellion, a way to keep a piece of my independence while trying to meet the expectations placed on me. Even though this plan provided me with a small sense of control, it added another layer of stress. Keeping up the pretense was exhausting. I had to be careful about when and how I worked, always making sure not to slip up. The emotional toll was immense, and it was becoming harder to maintain the facade. Jake's growing frustration was becoming more apparent. The tension between us reached a breaking point during one of his drunken outbursts. He accused me of undermining his vision for our future, insisting that I conform to his and his mother's expectations. It was a painful confrontation that left me questioning whether this relationship was worth the cost to my own well-being. I started to realize that no matter how much I tried to please everyone, I was losing myself. In the process, the facade of harmony was cracking, and beneath it lay the painful truth that something had to change. I had to make a choice, one that would require me to confront the reality of my situation and decide what I truly wanted for my future. The atmosphere at home was growing more oppressive every day. It felt like I was walking on eggshells, trying to keep up the pretense of quitting my job while secretly working from home. The strain was taking its toll on me, and Jake's frustrations were becoming more frequent and intense. One evening, Jake came home late, his mood sour and his words sharp. He had been drinking, and it was clear that he was more than just tipsy. I could see the frustration in his eyes as he staggered into the living room. "Why are you still working?" he demanded, his voice slurring slightly. "I thought you were going to focus on our life together." I tried to stay calm. "I'm not working, I've told you. I'm focusing on us. I'm just tidying up some things. Don't lie to me, Maya." His voice rose, and I could see the anger boiling over. "You're always working, always busy. What's the point of this if you can't even commit to us?" I was taken aback by his accusation. "I'm doing everything I can, but this isn't just about me, it's about us. I'm trying to balance both, but it's not easy." Jake's face flushed with rage. "Balance? It feels like you're always putting your work first. You're not supporting me or our relationship. You've changed, Maya." The words hit me hard. They were a reminder of everything that was wrong, of the constant pressure I felt to give up a part of myself for the sake of our relationship. But it wasn't just Jake's anger, it was his growing alignment with his mother's views that was causing the real conflict. His mother, Mrs. Harrison, had been visiting more often, her comments becoming sharper and more pointed. One day while Jake was at work, she came by to discuss the progress of our new life together. She looked around the apartment with a critical eye, her disapproval evident. "You know," she said, "a woman's role is important in a home. It's about creating a warm and welcoming space. I hope you're not letting your work interfere with that." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I'm doing my best to balance everything, Mrs. Harrison." She nodded, but there was a hint of satisfaction in her eyes. "Well, it's important to make sure that your priorities are in the right place. A home needs a woman's touch." The pressure from Jake and his mother was relentless. It felt like I was being squeezed from all sides, and no matter how hard I tried, I could meet their expectations without losing myself in the process. I was caught in a cycle of pretending and compromising, and it was beginning to break me down. The final confrontation came one night after a particularly intense argument. Jake was drunk again. His emotions raw and unfiltered. We were in the middle of a heated exchange when he suddenly shouted, "If you can't support me and our future, then what are we even doing here? I can't keep living like this." His words were like a knife to my heart. I felt a deep crushing sense of realization. I couldn't keep living under this pressure, the constant struggle to maintain a facade, the relentless push to conform to someone else's expectations. It was all too much. In the heat of the moment, I made a decision that would change everything. "Maybe you're right," I said, my voice trembling. "Maybe this isn't working. I can't keep living like this." Jake's face showed a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" I nodded, feeling tears well up. "I can't do this anymore. I need to find a way to be true to myself. I'm sorry, but I need to leave." The look on Jake's face was a mix of shock and fury. "You're just going to walk away?" "I'm not walking away from you," I said, my voice firm despite the tears. "I'm walking away from a life that's making me lose myself." That night I packed a few bags with the essentials and made arrangements to stay with a friend. The decision wasn't easy and it felt like I was tearing a piece of my heart away, but deep down I knew it was the only way I could reclaim my independence and start rebuilding my life on my own terms. As I walked out of the apartment, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. The life I had tried so hard to build was unraveling, but in its place I was beginning to see a glimmer of hope. I had taken the first step toward finding myself again, even if it meant facing an uncertain future. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. I settled into a small apartment of my own, a cozy space that felt like a blank canvas for a new beginning. I returned to my graphic design work and my colleagues welcomed me back with open arms. Their support was a balm to my soul, and it reminded me of why I had chosen this path in the first place. I threw myself back into my career with renewed passion. My work became a source of joy and empowerment. It was a relief to focus solely on projects that mattered to me without the constant pressure to prioritize someone else's expectations. I started to explore new hobbies: painting, hiking, and even cooking, which had always been on the back burner. It felt exhilarating to rediscover parts of myself that had been overshadowed by my previous relationship. One day while I was at a coffee shop, I ran into old friends. It was wonderful to reconnect with them and share stories about our lives. They were genuinely happy to see me and were curious about my new beginnings. It felt good to share my journey and receive their encouragement. It was a reminder that I had not only lost myself in the past relationship but also gained a new sense of clarity and purpose. Months later, Jake reached out to me. I was surprised to receive a message from him, especially since I had not heard from him since moving out. He was candid about his struggles, including losing his job and feeling lost without me. He expressed a desire to talk and possibly rekindle our relationship. I was tempted to meet with him to see if there was any way to find closure or understanding. However, after reflecting on everything I had been through, I realized that my life had taken a new direction. I had found a stronger sense of self-worth and clarity about what I wanted. The idea of going back to a relationship that had caused me so much pain seemed like a step backward. When we finally met, Jake was visibly different. He seemed older, more worn out, and his demeanor was one of regret. He apologized for how he had treated me and admitted that he had made mistakes, but as we talked I knew deep down that the relationship we had was not something I wanted to revisit. I've changed a lot, Jake said, his voice filled with remorse. I realize now how much I took you for granted. I'm sorry for everything. I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. I appreciate your apology, Jake, but I've grown a lot since we parted ways. I'm in a different place now and I need to keep moving forward. He nodded, understanding my decision. I get it, Maya. I hope you find the happiness you're looking for. As I walked away from that meeting, I felt a profound sense of closure. I was finally free from the shadows of my past, ready to embrace the future with confidence. I had reclaimed my independence and learned to value myself in ways I hadn't before. My journey of self-discovering had been challenging, but it had led me to a place of personal fulfillment and happiness. The story of my life had come full circle and I was ready to write the next chapter with a heart full of hope and a mind clear about what truly mattered to me.